So, guys, this is probably going to be a very interesting discussion. And I have known this gentleman for ages, right? At least for the past 7, 8 years. And they have had a fabulous journey. They've been one of the earliest pioneers of our industrial IoT ecosystem, both EV and industrial IoT ecosystem from our Matrix Forum. They've been part and parcel of our community from 2014-15 onwards, right? And we'd love to kind of go through a bit more details about their journey, right? And recently, if you guys have seen the news, Derick's company, Flutura, got acquired by Accenture. Rahul's company, ExactSpace, had an strategic investment from Thermax. And of course, Ravikiran's company, Numocity, got acquired by ABB, right? So great successes, great stories. So today, what we're going to do is delve into back from their starting days, their trials and tribulations around their journey of creating the startup, the problems they faced, the fun incidents you guys have had, the situations where you faced, gosh, let's just scrap this startup, go back to my day jobs, right? All of us had. And I think, you know, at least there are a lot of budding folks out here trying to start up companies and so forth. It is not an easy journey, right? It's a long, arduous journey. And I want to, so the good news is we kind of hear about the success stories, right? Only. Right? We read it in Economic Times, other newspapers, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on underneath that really makes them successful. So we want to kind of delve into it a bit more over the course of the next 1 hour. So starting with Derick and then with Rahul and Ravikiran, wanted just a couple of minutes, your previous background before you guys started your own companies. What did you do? What kind of made you start this company? What was the initial kind of days when you tried to build up your team, get your co-founder? I'd love to hear a bit more of your story. But start with what did you do back before starting Flutura, please.
Sure. Good morning, all. I started my journey at Thermax, actually, which funded this thing. So I was very fascinated by boiler design, so I started my career there, spent a couple of years there. Then I worked in the US for about 6 years with AT&T and Nortel Networks in Calgary. And then decided to come and join Mindtree in the year 2000. It was a formative experience because before that I was a technical guy. But in Mindtree I got to space to build a practice and also learned the sales aspects of things. It kind of shaped me. What was the motivation behind starting the company? I think as a services company, we were constantly being told that you're supposed to be cheaper, not faster or better. And, and that kind of set a kida rolling in our head, saying that we have to do something which is faster, better, but not cheaper. We'll price it premium. But we didn't know where to do it. So Krishnan, Srikanth, and myself used to brainstorm for 3 years almost. And one fine day, the kida came out, and we started the company. And
which year was that?
That was 2012. 2012, yeah. And 2012, when we came out, we had a choice. We could start something in the consumer AI space or in the industrial AI space. Consumer AI space, the Bay Area noise was extremely high, so we decided to embrace the industrial AI space. The noise was less, but the sales journey was very tough, so to speak. And then we started off. So
you and Raman knew each other?
Well, 3 of us were partners in crime for 10 years, yeah, at Mindtree, yeah. So the chemistry was there. And when we started our journey, initially at least, we didn't know the industrial space at all, especially industrial digital sales, right? It's very complex to do that. And we were lucky enough to get a breakthrough at Bestcom. I remember Bestcom. Bestcom those days, they had smart meter data for 3 years, and the problem statement they said was, we don't need AI or any of that stuff. We just need to draw a line across 3 years worth of data, right? Can you help us draw a line across 3 years worth of data? Because it was kind of fragmented, and that's where we started our journey, yeah.
Great. Rahul, I think I met you way back in 2016 in your previous company.
Yeah. 2015, 16, yes. So, I mean, much like Derick, I have zero background in industrial. Once I finished my engineering, I started off my career in data. Was working with Target, the US retail chain. I was part of their data warehousing and analytics practice. That happened for 4 years, and then I, got a business degree, and I've been working with startups ever since. The company that Shom has been referring to is one of the startups I started working with. It was broadly in the space of IoT, a lot to do with communications and things like that. But they funnily chose me to see what we could do in the industrial space. And 2015 was really when I set foot in the first manufacturing plant ever, right? And here we were exploring what we could do, but purely from interest in data and analytics, we kind of went to power plants, steel plants, cement plants, a bunch of them. Every single discussion was moving back to, hey, we have all the sensors, very highly sensorized, so IoT from that sense really wasn't there, but we have all of this data, what could you do? The first problem we had was in a power plant, they gave us a very small part of the power plant, and they said, can you help optimize this energy consumption here? And in 3 weeks, we were like, bachas really, very, very primitive ideas. We went back with some kind of an analysis, and they said in one section, we were able to bring down energy consumption by around 10%, right? We didn't know what we did, but what we definitely knew then was across all these industries, there were recurring problems of poor decision making because there was just too much for people to focus on, and everyone can't make the best decisions. This was, what got us started, and like Derick said, there is a KIDA. The KIDA was that most of the solutions that were coming up was driven by services. But we realized that industries needed products, but products which also had the domain built into them. So we, 1 year before starting ExactSpace, this was in 2018, beginning of 2018. So 1 year prior to that, Arun and myself, Arun also incidentally worked at Altix. Arun and myself, we used to visit a power plant every single weekend. So it was a 4-hour drive in Salem from Bangalore. So every Saturday we used to drive up to Salem. They funnily gave us an opportunity to deploy some data collection agents and things like that. So we used to go there, interact with them, figure out what problems are there to solve, come back, solve it for the rest of the week, go back again and see if there is something that we could contribute or add value. So that was really the journey for us before I started ExactSpace.
Thanks. Ravi?
Yeah, thanks, Om. Morning, all of you. I worked in a little telecomish background for a long time. Worked with Siemens and then Nokia for close to 17 years. Did multiple things there, international markets in India. In India, some of the things which we did at that time was to bring all the prepaid systems. I'm quite sure all of you use prepaid SIM cards, but in 2002, it was something new. So we were the team which built everything which you did from a chota recharge to all kinds of charging to data charging eventually. That's what I did in Siemens and Nokia. So spent a lot of time with all Indian telco operators at that time. Towards the end, I worked with the rollout of 3G. Now 3G looks very old, but 2010, it was a very big thing. So I was responsible in Nokia for value-added services. And that's what triggered me to be an entrepreneur. Because 2 years, I kind of consulted and helped all the telcos to see what vast services can they offer on data. All of them did not do any of them what we talked about, but that triggered me to say, why can't we do something outside? Like OTT succeeded with whether it's WhatsApp, YouTube, or any of them. I was also responsible for M2M. This was a precursor or a predecessor of IoT. I was selling the first M2M platform to Vodafone and others to get the power plants and the smart meters connected. I was doing from the connectivity part, and we called it M2M. And none of those worked when I was doing it there, and I said, why can't I do it on my own? I mean, why should I do it within a larger setup? That's what triggered me to start up, but the market was not ready. Way back in 2011 is when I started. Nobody wanted whatever I presented to any of them. They said, this is not what we want. I ended up doing a startup in e-commerce space, doing data, trying to help them to do a market automation of e-commerce. We had a lot of customers, but that didn't scale. My second company, I went back to telco because I knew telco very well. So did that for 2 years, and then a lot of work on industrial IoT. I think that's where I would say IoT Forum was very instrumental. I was part of many of the initiatives here. But that led to an EV space, which I think you know right from the beginning. So 2017 is where we looked at EV space, and then we transitioned into EV.
So great. I mean, pretty interesting aspects. So none of you were actually spent like decades in the specific area that you guys are in today, right? So you went from more services to industrial, you went from more consumer and other businesses to industrial. And you were the telecom guy, right? At Nokia Siemens, you got into EV. So a couple of trends and so forth, in fact, from the 2025 startups we have invested in, we are seeing as well. So do you guys feel that having the 2 decades or 1 decade of expertise in a certain sector, it kind of narrows your mind and so forth. So it's sometimes good to come from an outside world and start looking at it fresh. Do you guys see this as a huge advantage when you guys went in? Because you took kind of the consumer, the technology aspect background, and then said, hey, these things can be automated. But the folks that are in the industrial domain, going into the boiler stuff every day, for decades, they're kindly probably jaded. Hey, this is the way things are done. What's your thought?
Maybe I'll take a shot at this, please. Because we see it every day now. The electrical industry, now it's like a matrix, right? We have telco, electrical, and automotive, all of them coming together. The world they see is from their own way, the way you explained. We have seen how to scale up systems 20 years back with what happened in telco. So we are able to relate to a lot of things which can happen, which will happen, which the people in the industry are not able to see that. And that's a very big advantage we have when we go in and we talk about how systems scaled, how rapidly a 30 million can become a 1 billion, and how an EV, which was, for us, it's been, same thing has happened. So if you remember when we were talking about few chargers. Yeah. Now we are delivering more than a gigawatt of power every month. It's not every year, every month we are delivering. Now it's increasing. So that's a scale we were talking, saying that it will happen. And the learning was from the other industry, which had nothing to do with this industry. But now I think there is a lot of acceptance that industries can cross-learn from each other.
Exactly. So that's for all the budding entrepreneurs out here, I'd clearly look at least find in your founding team a bit of a different background from different industries and so forth. Another aspect on the technology side, we are also seeing a lot of multidisciplinary kind of folks coming in with biotech and computer science background, with electrical engineering and biotech background. These are the kind of companies that are going to shine. Because today, the domain specific in a specific industry or from a specific technology, those days are probably gone. It's a time of mixing and matching things from different industries, from different technologies together, right? So I'd like to then ask Derick, so once you formed the company, right, you kind of did a couple of these projects. So when do you think you got the product market fit? When did you say, aha, this is a fantastic time. I got the first couple of customers. I'm starting to see a pattern across these customers, right? Versus initial days, you probably were doing a lot of services-centric aspects. So when did you find the product market fit? When did that happen? And maybe you can talk about a bit more about how difficult was to acquire your first customer versus the 5th or the 10th customer, please.
Sure. So roughly it took us about 2.5 years to get the product market fit. So our initial hypothesis was...
how do you define your product market fit?
Okay.
Would love to get that.
So we have our own variant of that, is that we at least get 5 customers willing to pay for the same problem. Okay, that's very simple, okay? And a non-founder can sell it, okay? These 2 aspects. Our initial journey, I think we were biased towards smart meters because Bescom gave us our first project. We were very excited by the solution, and we said the world needed energy consumption to be tracked, monitored, and we started with smart meters. And we were very clear that money will come not from India, from outside India. Okay. So India, we did a couple of projects, but we couldn't scale it outside India. And at some point in time, we gave up smart meter analytics completely. And we landed in Houston, and Houston, we found out it was the energy hub. It was the Silicon Valley for energy. So one of the problem statement which was given to us was, that was the time when Mackinac blast happened, and about 18 people got killed in a rig. And the root cause of that was a flooding of signals, alarms, and they couldn't prioritize the alarms. So they got overwhelmed with the alarms, and they couldn't take the right action. They ignored the alarms, actually. So we built essentially a very simple tool which would prioritize and rank order alarms and signals and make sure that the right people get to act on it and recommend the next best action for it. Very simple tool. So we used to visit all the HSE departments of oil and gas. Mackinac blast we used to take as an example and say that this thing solves that problem. What we found was we used to get a lot of claps in the conference rooms. They used to nod their heads and stuff like that. But for another 14, 15 months, nobody wrote a check. Okay, so we were, again, that was the second iteration of the product, and we were wondering, why is it that we're getting a lot of applause in the conference room, but nobody's writing a check? And we took a couple of them outside, and we had a drink, and over a drink, they said that you're digitizing our liabilities. Okay, it's good, it solves the thing, but you're digitizing our liabilities. And then we realized that it's going to be a very tough thing. Then we said we'll ignore safety and move on to core operations, upstream operations. And that's when we started finding a lot of traction. Whenever it hits directly a downtime, every hour of production loss is a lot of money. And that's when we started and saw a lot of traction in upstream. Yeah. So the third iteration, 2 years.
Rahul?
So just a little background, to the previous question also. One of our co-founders comes from very core energy experience. We went to a few conferences, Arun and myself, and we felt like complete fish out of water, meaning we had to be insiders. They were all receptive of ideas like Derick was mentioning, but the seriousness wasn't there when they were speaking. So one of the co-founders we brought on board was, he's got close to 35 years of experience in the industry, and I think that
opens up the doors. Opens up the doors.
Absolutely. Opens up the doors, creates credibility. I think, especially for industrial area, to have seriousness in conversations, it's very, very important. One other thing we decided, of course, learnings from Flutura's journey also. One of the first things we did when we started up was I pinged Derick. I said, hey, I need some advice. I don't want to make the same mistake. So both Krish and Derick were extremely supportive, to provide all those inputs. And we decided we're not going to look at multiple industries. We said we're just going to look at one industry, one energy veteran with us, so we'll just focus on power. We started with energy optimization kind of use cases, but it is extremely difficult for people to sign off on benefits in energy optimization because there's a lot of coal-related accounting in the background, so we said we don't want to do that. We spent close to 6 months to a year on that, and then started focusing on reliability, the same kind of issue, but in power plants. The complexity is, there are 200 different equipment, hundreds of ways in which they could fail. So we were trying to pick one specific type of failure, but what we realized is plants wanted us to look across all of their equipment. And interestingly, one of the first customers we had is BHEL. They are makers of almost all utility-sized equipment. That gave a lot of validation. And ever since, the offering to the market has been very clear for us. We're able to connect with the customer on few different counts. One is validated by an OEM like BHEL. 2, we have an energy insider. 3, we have a solution which was deployed at 2 or 3 different places. So then on, the messaging to the customer has been very clear. So it took us about 1.5 years or so. But since then, reliability in energy-related assets has been our go-to offering. And we realized there is definitely a value over there. Beyond that, product market fit requires a certain business motion, right? that is still hard for us to gauge. While the message that we pass on is very, very clear, people recognize that it's a problem. How do you monetize that? Different companies have different ways in which they'd like to go about it.
That's the trouble of industrial.
Industrial analytics or anything to do with industry, that really is the problem for us.
Ravi, what has been your journey?
Yeah, so
On
I
the
think
EV side, is it much easier
oh no,
as
it
compared
was
to
been
industrial?
very difficult. The
But
first
you were starting up an industry from scratch, right? You had a benefit on that front.
So one way it's a benefit, the other way around is we did everything the hard way. For, of course, later players to kind of copy
You did
what
not
we
have
did.
Derick to advise you.
We did not have any references. Now kind of that's advantage and a disadvantage. I would say we had multiple milestones to see where we are scaling up and where we get a product market fit. Initial years, we did a lot. I heard advice from B.V. Jagdish much later. He said, who's paying you? Can you check? Who's the one who's writing a check to you? We realized that all the R&D teams were getting checks to us. I'm quite sure you know the first few years when we did that. We were doing good. We thought we were doing good, but the checks were coming from R&D. The internal R&D teams were giving us, it was more of a proof of concept for them than a scaling up solution for us. So we were very happy because I can take all the big names and they say they all paid us. And we were very happy. But we realized that we were not doing anything which would scale our system. Or because we were a product company, we were not a service company, we were not doing it for anybody. We were building a product. IP was with us. So I think that first realization after 1.5 years probably triggered us to say we don't want that money. And we put ourselves into a hard path saying we don't want that money. We won't go to R&D teams of large companies to get our orders. But that also was a difficult time for us because that was COVID. 8 months, it was completely, nobody was talking. But we just kept building. We thought we know what needs to be built because we had some experience with the larger companies. The scaling up was quite clear for us when we saw the product market fit. That is, we built something and we thought it would work in the market.
So what was the product market fit?
Yeah,
When did you realize that?
In a span of 6 to 8 months, we went from 0 customers to 25 customers doing exactly the same thing. Week after week, we were delivering systems every week with a small team. We were just a 5-people team doing, serving a lot of customers in India. We realized that what we had done was repeatable, easily sellable. There was a clear pricing model which we established actually in India. What we established is what everybody is following now. So these 3 fell in place for us. And there were days just post-COVID, we were in demos from morning till evening and closing the next day, picking up an order the 3rd day, delivering within a week. So every month we were adding 5 to 8 customers regularly. So that gave us a confidence that that was good. But I want to pick one word which Derick said, money is not in India. We realized that none of them eventually wanted to pay us once we wanted to scale it up. Then we looked at international markets and we weren't sure what we had in India, will it scale in other markets. But for us, luckily, it was exactly the requirement in most of the countries. I would call it emerging countries, not US, not Europe. We also found our blue ocean.
The two-wheeler countries.
Yeah, two-wheeler countries. But now we are actually with more the premium 4-wheelers. We moved away from 2-wheelers. That's another pivot we did. But all the emerging countries, we realized that it is very much like India. And if we get the right platform, we can go into every country. So we ended up now with 15 countries and we are doing it.
So this is very interesting, the point that he brought up. So many times what we see is, many of these large corporates have innovation teams, right, inside. So it's very easy for the early stage startup to go in and get some kind of a POC ongoing, right? But again, depends on who exactly pays. Most of these POC don't turn up into anything. So as investors, we also are extremely careful, diligencing in terms of what exactly, who is the customer, why have they taken it. Many times you just see this is just a proof of concept project done by the innovation teams because internally they have to show something out to their bosses, right? So be very careful on that front. I would like to each one of you to talk about maybe 2 incidents, right? One incident, it was kind of a major euphoria for the entire team. You guys went out and celebrated. The other case, probably you were completely on the troughs, ready to give up. Can you just talk about a couple of, maybe one or two of incidents, each one of you, please?
Yeah, so it's related to the sales rhythm. So we are learning sales. So if you look at sales, I think from our point of view, our learning experience, so there's B2C sales, there's B2B sales, and there's industrial sales. Industrial digital sales. Industrial normal sales is tangible. You sell a hardware, you can touch and feel it with your senses. Industrial digital sales is very intangible, and you're selling to people who are buying, used to buying intangibles, the tangibles from you. So we had two situations. One was with Shell. So we were very clear we wanted an iconic logo. Okay, we'll take on the big guys. So we targeted Technip FMC, which was the largest manufacturer of subsea equipments in Houston. We also targeted Shell. And both these places, there were about 14, 15 companies who were bidding for that project. And it will finally boil down to two. It'll be us, and it'll be a local Houston-based company. And we'll always lose out to the Houston-based company. So it was a journey where we'll go from 0 to 99, 99 to 100, we'll drop out.
This was repeated a couple of times.
Constant pattern, okay. And we figured out that energy industry is very tribal in nature. They buy from their brothers in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Alabama. It doesn't matter what the quality of the product is. So we understood that rhythm, but then what we figured out was they'll give it to a local company, and 6 months later they'll call us and say that didn't work out. Okay, that didn't work out. So we figured out that we will not end the sales process when we lose it. We'll continue to maintain it because we are very sure that when you take it from the conference room pilot to the field test, that's where the software broke down, the volume of data. No, it just breaks. So that was one big learning for us, is that Energy trusted the Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Alabama brothers, and we had to be patient. It'll break down, and you can go and catch it, because he's at risk of losing his job. At that time, he will not be worried about who is giving the project. He wants to just, and that happened to us at Aramco also in Riyadh. Same thing. No, we lost it, and then about 1 year later, they came back to us and solved for it. So there's a common pattern among international customers when they're trying to consume something from Indian industrial startups, right? You'll always lose it at the last moment. No.
Would a partnership with a systems integrator major in Houston, would that have helped?
Systems if I can be blunt, none of the Indian service providers, nothing worked. Okay. So most of the time, we figured out the partners were trying to learn the solution. Okay. So it didn't work for us. I think the partnership with consulting companies helped for us, because they were shaping the next year's budget for digital. Okay, and that helped for us. So one is that pattern. The other pattern is that you have to be an insider, and it's there's no science to it, but you'll have to hack it out. Yeah.
Rahul?
So this is like there have been many euphoric moments. And funnily, this is always when there is a failure in a customer's plant. We are actually, I mean, it's quite like an antithesis, but we are trying to prevent failures in plants. And when there are failures in plants, we feel very happy, at least in the initial stages, because then immediately they want to test whether you're working or not.
They give you a call, right?
And we're waiting for that call. Say, hey, we gave you these alarms and stuff, and you should have looked at it. Invariably, whether it's a pilot, POC, or a commercial contract for us, it's always at the initial 5 to 6 months, no one trusts the solution. Right? Digital, in the industries, they say, hey, we know our stuff better, so things like that. So there have been many of these silly, euphoric moments when customer calls and say, did you pick this up? We say yes, and we feel really happy. But a few very, very good moments, I think, winning like a global tender with the likes of BHEL, reasonably high value kind of project within the first year of our existence was extremely, upbeat for us. Similarly, a few large, contracts, those are there. But I tell you, feeling down in the dumps is almost a bi-weekly affair. And I have to be really, very real about it, because 1 week, you're talking about celebrations. We get a very large contract. You don't get to celebrate it wholeheartedly. Because as soon as the process has drained you by the time you've got it, and before the PO has come out, they want us to start executing, right? And you're constantly thinking about, hey, I need to hire another 10 people to get this project going and stuff like that. But overall, in the 5 years, there have been so many consistent ups and downs. It's something that you get used to, because we've been just driven by the vision of saying we want to create impact. And every now and then, today I just got a mail 10 minutes back from a customer saying, hey, we had 2 failures and your system didn't catch it.
Yeah.
And you're constantly worrying about how to do the next bit of the solutioning, how to build a feature that can catch all of this. So there have been a lot of these downs, but I think the ups are very, very sweet whenever they occur.
That carries you on, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so of course, like both of them said, it's a continuous process. You face both moments where you feel very good, moments where you don't find it very good. For us, in our journey, I think the biggest impact was, I'm not taking the customer name because they wouldn't like me to say what I'm saying. In India, the products, I don't know if both of them faced it, the first thing everybody thinks is IP is mine. And I said, I'm a product company, why would my IP be yours?
They also want the source code.
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Give me your source code. I said, would you ask the same to SAP? They said, no. Then why are you asking me? I said, you're a small company and I don't believe whether you will do what you're doing. So with one of the largest companies in India, we got into, it was the biggest deal. We negotiated for 6 months. And the last line was, I want your source code, I want your IP, that is mine.
I remember that. You mentioned that to me.
You know
yes.
this. So I think this is a learning which I've done repeatedly now. We walked out of it. We said, at the last minute, we called the topmost guy and we said, this is not on, we will walk out. They said, you walking out means you're dead in this market. You will not survive in this market anymore. Are you sure? We said, yes, our IP is our IP. Our source code is our source code. We are not giving it. That's it. I mean, whatever commercial we had, very good. Everything worked out fine. We walked out. We felt very terrible as a team because we worked very hard for it, because that was our scaling movement. We were looking at how to move from smaller players to India's largest player. Can we make it happen? We were there, but the conditions were different. But it turned out to be a good story eventually.
Did they come back?
Yes. 5 months back, later they came back and they agreed to all our terms and conditions. In fact, they even made a comment from the top procurement team. They said, this is the first time we have done an agreement as per your terms. We have never done an agreement as per our vendor's terms. So we created the first SaaS agreement in the EV space saying, this is how it should be.
Fantastic.
Protecting IP, protecting source code, and giving us a lot of leeway, which we had none. And we still got the same commercial. They are the biggest network in the country now. They are a biggest customer. That was very good for the team to see that if we stick to what we believe in, results will come. I mean, we may not have got it, but we stuck to it and we got it.
I mean, hats off to these entrepreneurs, right? So shifting gears slightly, right? So would love to get a bit more clarity around what has been kind of, again, Derick, you decided to sell, right? And what were the trigger points for that? Why not scale up the company? What were, if you can disclose whatever, right? How were you guys doing? How many customers? What were your, range of revenues and so forth like? And what kind of prompted and triggered you to sell? Love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So we were able to get a lot of initial branch, Shell, Technip FMC, Aramco. Our appetite was to get mega deals, industrial mega deals, which is to breach $10 million. Okay. We found that it was easy for an industrial startup to get sub $10 million kind of a deals. But the moment you breach 10 million, it becomes a different game. Okay. So we were handicapped in a couple of ways. One is, in all these large companies, we were going middle up. We are not going top down. Okay. Whereas there are a bunch of people who already had built relationship at the top, and it was easy for them to bring it down. So we felt we need to ride on the shoulders of a giant. Okay, that's number one. Most of the big guys are coming top down, whereas industrials are going middle up, startups at least. The second important point was many of these consulting companies are shaping the very budget of the organization, digital budget of the organization, and the way they should think. They're giving them the frames to think about digital. Okay.
Again, top down.
Top down, right. Top down. And if you want to breach, and most of these buyers do not know digital, right? Most of these, I mean, they're used to buying electrical mechanism, and these guys are giving them the lenses. So if you want to breach it, we thought we should be the lens providers, or we should partner with somebody who's providing those lenses. Because no, we have to go from being an order taker to an order shaper, right? And we didn't have the capability, to be honest with you. We needed to be funded. So either we get mega funding in India for industrial.
But you guys got funding, right? If I recall, Vertex, then Hitachi, all these guys kind of came in.
Yeah, we got about 8.5 mil. Okay.
Wasn't Hitachi able to open up those doors?
No, Hitachi was in Japan. Japan was a very tough market to breach. But if you look at a competition where we are encountering Spark Cognition, Palantir, they were funded $150 million, $200 million. Our closest competition was funded 20 times. Okay. And they were able to hire an army of sales guys, do a lot of sales experiments. Honestly, this requires a lot of industrial sales experiments. We didn't have the runway or the capital to do it, whereas they could. So that's why you find, and that's one of the biggest handicaps for industrial startups from India is, we are not capitalized to do enough sales experiments, because what works in a traditional B2B sales doesn't work in industrial B2B. Okay? And that was a dilemma we faced, and we were hungry to breach 10 million. So we said we'll ride on the shoulders of a giant. That's how we came to this.
Got it. So Rahul, you essentially decided to take an investment from a strategic player. Love to understand what was your kind of fundraising journey?
Sure.
Why finally you decided to take from a strategic player instead of a financial one, right?
Sure.
Obviously, what were the pros and cons? What was the response from the market? Love to hear your thoughts.
So a couple of years into our journey, we said, we definitely need to raise some funds.
You guys were bootstrapped for the first couple of years?
We were bootstrapped for the first 4 years, actually. But 2 years into the journey, obviously funds were drying out, the product development costs were very high, industrial sales cycles are painfully long, right? So we were looking at funds, and we got a lot of interest from typical VCs. There was also, I was sensing there's a lot of hesitation, because VCs obviously know industrial startups take time, the product development, the sales cycles, etc. It's not hit a switch and start scaling, right? It's not that kind of a business. So we sensed some kind of hesitation, and we also didn't want money to pour to identify what business is good for us. We wanted money which could help us immediately sell, right? So that was one other consideration that we had, and we were consistently getting sales. So there were some positives that we saw, but much like what Derick was mentioning, our biggest challenge was to do with sales, right? There are so many industrial organizations. The biggest of big companies are selling into these organizations. Invariably, these companies, rather customers, they come back to us. They say, hey, we find a solution better, but we've not been able to shape any of those deals, right? So we needed access, number one, and we also needed capital, which was patient, number two. The third is getting money from a strategic also gave us revenues. So it was not just that, you take the money.
In lieu of just the investment.
Exactly.
Right?
It's not just in lieu of investments. You have the investment to grow your team and the product, but we love your product. We want to use your product as well. So it's a double investment in that sense. But most importantly, someone like a Thermax has been around for 30, 40 years now. They're the leaders in the boiler energy segment. They have sold into at least 400, 500 different organizations across the globe. And the minute we started working with them, our product was planted with 100 customers. And it immediately gives us access to those many in industries which we didn't originally set out to sell into. And if the engagement continues, I think adjacent industries like food and beverages or chemicals or whatever it is, they become slightly easy and accessible for us. So these were the reasons we picked a strategic or an industrial investor to begin with, to give us that all these different validations.
Got it. What about you, Ravi?
Yeah, so once we realized that our scale comes from international markets, we hit a different problem. And also, we wanted to now have bigger accounts, not work with smaller players. We still continue to work with small and medium players, but we wanted to have all the oil and gas companies, the global majors, to be our customers. We have 2 of them on the table now, so which is very good for what we did. We were also looking at all the utilities, because those were the bigger players. There already is the medium to small players, which we could do directly. The moment we wanted to enter this segment, we realized that there were only few players globally. And 2 things were happening when we were going through this decision making. One was, to get any of those orders, they were willing to give it to only a larger player, not to any startup. And in most of these countries, we were not even eligible to pick the order, not even eligible to even bid for those tenders or bid for any of those methods. They wanted somebody. In India, it was good because we are a DIP certified startup. So every tender we can participate. Whether we get it or not is different, we can participate. International, we realized we really don't have room to do that. I think that was a kind of
So when was the trigger point for you?
This was in 21.
But you already had ABB as a investor, right?
but they wouldn't pick up the order for me.
Okay.
And nobody would pick the order for me because they were only a strategic, they were a small investor. They wouldn't do anything. They would open the door, but then they would say, it's left to you.
It's yours.
It's yours. You do what you want. But we wanted somebody who would pick the order. I mean, in fact, now we are one of the shortlisted vendors for a very large oil and gas company, which is going through the tendering process, last stages. Their only condition was, I'll give you the order to ABB only. I mean, only if ABB picks the order, you get the order. I can't give the order to you. I'm still an independent entity. I can pick the orders. Very clear, I won't give you the order.
Got it.
So I think that made us look at strategic, which can take us to many countries where they can not only open the door, but actually pick the order, not just. I think that was one trigger point. And second, also we realized that most of the companies, the top 5 software only, digital only vendors, all got acquired in 2021. The Israel, the US companies, everybody got acquired. We were one of those from India who were independently operating. We realized that the leverage they were getting by being acquired by one of the large ones. Schneider acquired somebody, Gilbarco acquired somebody. They were all the majors acquired one of these players. We realized that if we are not in that league, we will never enter that league because they will now push my competitors in the international market.
Got it.
So we were looking at a strategy who will actually take us. And ABB is world #1 in this space.
Yeah.
So we said, why not? I mean, that was the consideration.
So they gave you the offer or you approached them?
They made us.
Okay, got it.
We not only them, there were 4 others. Okay. So we took one.
I see. Great, fantastic. So would love to hear a bit more from each one of you, right? I mean, any specific word of advice to the budding entrepreneurs, the next generation. Rahul benefited from you, Derick, right? And would love to kind of any thoughts, any advice, especially on this domain of IoT, industrial space and so forth. What advice would you have from them? And now that you have exited your companies, would you also angel fund them as well? Go ahead.
So one of the biggest learnings for us was, at least in the industrial space, the mental models are very difficult to decode, right? The industrial mental model is a black box. So one of the biggest learning for us was to have a lot of conversations, one-on-one conversations outside the office, okay? Take them for a cup of coffee, beer, whatever. But they loosen up and give us insights which you normally don't get.
Drink always helps, huh?
Yeah, the Texans love their steak and beer. So, yeah, so just to give you an example, we took out the CEO of Stewart & Stevenson, largest fracking manufacturers. We took him out for a drink, and he was a 70-year-old gentleman. He didn't understand digital at all. And he gave us 2 pieces of insights, which are still very valuable. First, he said, son, you have to be inside the belly. I didn't understand what does it mean. You should be inside the belly. He said, you should be inside the equipment, so that when the equipment sells, you automatically sell. You don't have to sell it separately. Okay. So that was the first piece of Texan insight we got. The second piece of insight, so we used to always scream loud about our shiny new toys, digital, AI, IoT, yada, yada, yada. He said the best way to sell this is not to use those 3 words. Okay. Because we don't understand. You sell outcomes, but don't sell these 3 words. So after that conversation, we changed our sales strategy, and we were able to get a breakthrough with Technip FMC on similar inside the belly model, where we are embedded within the equipment itself. So one big advice is have a lot of off-road conversations, number one. Second is create a project plan around sales experiments you'll do every month. Okay, the velocity of sales experiments is extremely important because the sales playbook is still not out there. Okay, and nobody fully knows it as yet. I think most of them know only a percentage of that. And you need to shape your own point of view about what works for you in industrial sales, which means every month, similar to you doing a release of features for product, you should be saying, hey, these are the 5 experiments I'll do, and see what works out. And the third learning for us was probably we should have made a couple of bold moves upfront. When I say bold moves, we were hesitant to go to OTC in Houston or ADIPEC in Abu Dhabi or CERAWeek, because these were the platforms where you actually get noticed. We were intimidated by the amount of money they charge, but I think we should have made those moves, because once you're there, you become credible. So if I have to do it again, I will make big, bold moves in making sure that our presence is felt upfront, and do a lot of sales hacks every month.
Got it. Thanks. Thanks. Angel funding?
Money hasn't come. Let it come.
Rahul, please.
So one thing that still holds us in decent state, I mean, there is a lot of, I mean, you need to walk into this with your eyes open. Industrial sales is not easy, right? It is time consuming. No amount of capital is going to speed that up. I mean, maybe excessive amounts of capital can speed it up, but typical your seed or Series A kind of funds may not speed it up because they have their own pace of business. That's one thing, right? So to have the product in place for the longer vision is going to be very important. One thing that keeps us going is the impact that we're trying to create is very, very big. It is a complex problem that we're trying to solve. And that, we keep speaking, we say, we're just suckers for complexity, right? I mean, we could build something very simple and get it out in the market, but at least in the industrial space, your moat becomes that. When you're trying to solve a complex problem, when you're trying to solve something very difficult, it takes time, but that becomes the moat. So think of the problem that you're trying to solve and let that be very, very big. If you try to solve a very small problem and be very fast about scaling, the value that you create may not be as big. That's my honest opinion. And the third most important thing is, I think, being an insider is very, very important, right? We went, initially, we just spoke to our plan guys. They hear you, but they don't really take you very seriously.
Get a co-founder as an insider, or have a senior guy?
Have a senior guy from the industry selling on your behalf, or being a part of your core team. That's very, very important.
Yeah, so kind of learnings for us in the new industry when nobody knows what it is. What they expect is that you are the expert, you are the consultative. You are in a consultative mode. Most of them want the startup founders to actually know what it is. Many times my understanding was customers know what they want. We realized that they don't know. They are expecting you to know and tell them what they should have.
So early days of consultative selling.
Very consultative selling. So if
you guys did very well. I mean, you guys wrote up a lot of white papers and so forth. I mean, anytime I was looking at the EV industry, I used to call them up.
So though we are not from the EV industry, we took a lot of pain. I mean, my co-founders, Siddharth and everybody, we went to the depth of the topics. We understood exactly what it is. Though nothing was happening in India, we figured out what it is. And I think that helped us in a very big way, because we could actually put the landscape out and we can explain to every large player, this is what you need. And later, of course, they started adding their inputs and it was then more consultative. But in the beginning, you need to know exactly what it is. I think that's one. The second learning for anybody building a digital platforms for IoT or any of them, software is not free. This is the most constant problem I face. Any conversation you go, they say the box, I think you also said inside the belly, That's what we are doing now inside ABB's belly. But the initial thing was people would say, hardware I know how much the charger costs. I know the components and I know the price. Software should be free. Why are you charging for a software? We are the only ones who have stuck to our price and we say, this is the price. If you want it, you take it. Otherwise, we are
That was
okay.
a fantastic bold move.
Yeah,
Yes.
and even now, we haven't taken the government orders. We have not taken. There are a lot of cases where we say it's not free. I'm not giving it free. I think as a startup founder, if anybody pushes you to get an order, if it is free, don't take it, because that's not going to give you anything. You need to think whether it really you want to do a free deal. But most people ask software to be free. I think that's the biggest learning I had.
Thank you, guys.